All right. Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to another future-focused weekly update. I am Christopher Lind, and hopefully, if I'm doing my job, I am keeping you 10 steps ahead of what's going on at the intersection of business, technology, and human experience, and hopefully bringing a little bit of comfort and peace amidst all the chaos and noise around us, and hopefully helping you make sense of some of this stuff. Thanks to all of you who listen, watch, and all these other things. I appreciate our conversations and enjoy engaging with all of you. Keep the feedback coming if there's things I can do differently or improve on. And then also, like, share, subscribe, comment, whatever. I do see all that stuff. I love engaging with all of you and appreciate it. And tell a friend. Maybe they can benefit from this stuff too. One other quick update before I get into my usual updates. I am in the process of working on, I decided that, I get a consistent question from people a lot. And I see a lot of people struggling with this of, we're going into this AI age. I'm not really sure what to do. I'm not sure how to approach it or what to do with it or how to think about it. I want to use it more, but I don't want to lose my identity, all sorts of things. And so I figure, hey, you know what? I built my whole career in human performance and education. So I'm in the process of working on a course right now that I haven't quite determined when it'll release, but just want to make you aware of that. So if you are somebody who's like, whether you're a business leader or an employee or somebody just in general trying to figure out how to make sense of things, keep an eye out because it'll be available. I still got to figure out where it'll be launching from. But anyway, that's something I'm working on now. All right. Got my usual 4 updates for this based on this. This week was hard. I actually had a hard time narrating or narrowing down my 4. But I've got 4. One has to do with OpenAI. One has to do with AI and cognitive decay. One has to do with Blue Origin's space trip, and then the resurrection of extinct animals. So there you go. There's a little bit of a teaser. Hopefully that makes you stick around. Otherwise, I put the show notes in there. So if you want to skip to the ones that you like best, go ahead. I promise I won't be offended. So let's get started. So OpenAI. There's a bunch of stuff with OpenAI. Probably I could have done a whole episode on what's been going on with OpenAI. I know last week I talked about some of the shifts in the image gen capability, but they've launched GPT 4.5 and they've done some other things. But the one that actually grabbed my attention the most was there is all this buzz right now about OpenAI's launch of O3 and O4 Mini. Now, I know some people might go, O3, didn't that already happen? Kind of, and then they pulled it back. And anyway, I don't want to get into the details of that. But really what this is it's their new latest PhD level AI capability that is going to be coming out. There's buzz it might come out as soon as this week or next week. I guess we'll see what happens. Probably not this week because you're listening to this at the end of the week. But all that to say, it's designed to be this hyper premium, hyper capable AI model that is capable, according to some of the headlines on this, to be able to do research on really deep, complex topics like biology, physics, engineering, all this stuff. Like literally, it's PhD level, supposedly. And so you can just let it do PhD work. Now, that PhD work comes at a pretty steep price. Now, if you don't know how OpenAI is structured today, there's the free version. Then there's the premium, I think. There's a tier that's $20 a month. Then there's like the pro, I think that's what it's called. That's $200 a month. And now they're going to be introducing this new one, which don't put this one on your credit card unless you're somebody who I probably never met with this kind of flexible cash each month. But 20 grand a month is what this new one is going to be. This PhD level, AI model, $20,000 a month. So $240,000 a year for this kind of a thing. What's really interesting about this, there's a few things that I really wanted to talk about related to it. But one of the things I hear a lot in the senior leadership space is how AI is going to be this super cost-effective, affordable, accessible thing. And I looked at that and I went, 20 grand a month for a subscription to something that I can already tell you right now is going to need a lot of oversight. It's going to need a PhD, if not multiple PhDs, to oversee it. And I know for some folks, $240,000 a month might sound just like astronomical, but to a large corporation, for a very seasoned PhD doing research on some of these advanced topics, $240,000 a month it's not outrageous. So if somebody's like throwing up going, oh my gosh, who would spend that on AI? I mean, it's not outrageous for that level of capability, but it certainly blurs the lines of like, is this actually more affordable? And if so, is it really more affordable, or could this end up being much more expensive? Now, there were 3 points related to this that I really kind of was circling around as I was thinking more about it. And the first one is, one of the things I really, really liked about AI is it was starting to come into play, and it still largely is doing this. But this whole idea that AI can democratize things, it can make things that were formerly inaccessible to things and help widen the playing field, make things more accessible to those around, whatever, balance the scales a bit. 20 grand a month, while that may be totally affordable for a large company who's used to hiring PhDs and advanced senior professionals to do really advanced work. I mean, to a startup or something like that, or a smaller organization, that's still pretty unattainable. So even if it can deliver on what it says it can deliver on, we're very quickly separating from this whole, hey, this is accessible to everyone. Well, not really. And granted, I understand why. If you look at, I read an article this week about what Amazon and Bezos is spending on AI, and a lot of these big companies, they are literally setting piles of cash out on, open fields, pouring kerosene on and just throwing matches at it. I mean, that's how much money these companies are just blowing on AI. So I understand at some point, you got to make some money. You got to get a return on that investment, or you're going to go completely under. Now, some of these big players have quite a bit of money to play with, so they can, but it's not sustainable. And so I understand the AI companies at some point have to do something to help offset their costs. They have to be able to turn a profit. They have to be able to fund the furthering of their own research. But it does also bring into the conversation this whole idea of, is this capability going to really be accessible, or are we going to just continue furthering the gap between the haves and the have-nots, where companies that have money can now have entire teams of advanced PhD AI agents working alongside their advanced PhD human agents, now super accelerating their competitive edge and their growth, compared to somebody who could barely afford one human PhD, can't afford to add another PhD AI agent, and now they're just really stuck. And do you see what I'm saying? Like, I think the possibility for this to further widen the gap is real, and it's something we need to be mindful of, because the more we widen the gap, the worse it gets. And it gets worse for everybody. While it might seem like, well, if we widen the gap, isn't it great for the people on the winning side? Only to a point. Like, not really, because once the middle starts to fall out, the whole thing falls out. You lose the market. You lose the people who can help fuel it. You lose the consumers who can buy it. All this stuff. When the middle goes, eventually the whole thing falls in on itself. And that's where I'm excited to see what the capability is, which is my next point. But I do have concerns of where this is taking us in terms of, is this going to lead us away from where AI was leading us, which was really democratizing, creating capability for all, making things accessible to anybody? And will we now move into territory where it's just now doing the opposite and further fueling the gap? The other one, though, is the value proposition. The marketing speak for this is, it can do all of your advanced research for you. It's autonomous. It can figure out what kind of research needs to be done and then perform it. Again, the sales pitch is big. Why not have a PhD who can do all the latest in advanced research with no direction and then take care of the research all on its own? You set it and forget it. I mean, that sounds really good, but you don't have to spend very much time studying human history to know if something sounds too good to be true, it is. It is. So to anybody thinking that this is just going to be a magic bullet that magically reduces all of the problems that we have when it comes to advanced technologies and advanced engineering and complex challenges and go, great, oh man, now we have an advanced AI model that'll do this all for us. It won't. And that's where I said, going back to the luxury piece, it's now going to be like, well, is this only going to be accessible and a help to those who already have the money to have the human capability to understand what this is doing? Because again, going to the value proposition, I've said this so many times with these AI models. One, the more advanced they become, the more oversight they require, because just the nefarious tendencies, and don't take me out of context on that, they're not consciously being nefarious. It's just the way AI works. Going back to some of the things I talked about with Google's AGI last week. So it's not necessarily they're doing, but you need advanced people who understand what it's trying to do to be able to steer it, to be able to predict around corners, to be able to see some of this, to collaborate with it. I mean, this goes back to this, like the human robot, human machine interactions. That's going to become par for the course in professional fields. We're just going to have to get really good at working alongside these machines. But that means you need advanced, experienced professionals to be alongside them. So you can't just shortcut that with an AI model, despite what the headlines say. So not only does it potentially become even more inaccessible, but it also opens up risk for people to do really reckless things, because they go, well, we bought 2 subscriptions to, O3, O4 mini. That's all we got. So we just need like a junior admin to just feed it stuff so it'll just do the work for it. That is dangerous territory. And I will tell you right now, if you were a senior leader considering doing some of that, please do not do that. One, I do think the cost is going to come down, but it does, even just the value proposition of this, I just really don't know that there's the value. You can take one of these less advanced models and put it in the hands of a seasoned human professional who knows what they're doing. Will that accomplish more than one of these super advanced models on their own? I think the short answer to that is going to be 100% yes. Okay, so if you said, if I was going to choose between the latest OpenAI PhD agent and a human with the free or the cheap version of an AI model, what would you go with? Hands down, go with the human alongside a cheap or free version of AI versus a very advanced one. And I'm sure the AI companies would hate me for saying that, but really, humans and machines together always outperform even the best machines. The data backs that. But then it comes into play of like, well, but what if you had humans alongside these other machines? Well, then I'm guessing it's probably going to beat human plus free version. But then at what point, how are you defining your value proposition? And it's still too early to tell. I just am a little bit skeptical of, is it actually going to deliver on its promises? I don't think it will, at least not the way it's positioned today. But it's still too early to tell. But something to be keeping an eye on, because if you start hearing, AI is coming for scientists and engineers, advanced engineers, and all that, this is what's fueling it. This is what's, because as the second OpenAI drops this, every other one of the companies is going to drop the same thing, same price tier, same proclaimed capabilities. It's coming. And I think it does talk about kind of the overall market dynamics of where things are going. What is going to happen with some of this stuff as we push these much more expensive advanced models? In some ways, advanced, slightly less advanced models, but still really good advanced models get more affordable, more accessible. I'm really interested to see where the AI market goes with some of this stuff right now. But I just wanted to make you aware of what's happening with OpenAI and how that may fuel some stuff you're going to start seeing, not only in the hype cycle, but also in the practical, okay, like how are senior business leaders now going to be making decisions about things? Well, they're going to start having to ask questions of, hey, is this something we should seriously consider? If so, what is our value prop? How do we define what our value prop is? How is this going to affect the overall AI market? And if you need help with that, you know where to find me. I'm happy to help. All right, let's move on to number 2. This one was, I feel like a lot of people I talk to are starting to have these moments more and more frequently now. But I was reading this futurism article about a guy named Sam Schnechtler. I'm not even going to try and pronounce it, but he was a tech reporter, and he had a bit of a panic moment because what he found himself doing was he started just using ChatGPT for more and more and more and more stuff. He was having it write his emails. He was having it write his text messages, all this stuff. And all of a sudden he had this wake up moment where he was struggling even just to put together the words for something basic like, hey, do you want to go get drinks tonight? Or say, he couldn't even do it. He just became so used to AI generating it for him. He couldn't. And to me, I think we're going to see a lot more of this stuff, and the data backs it. That's, I think, the part that is, this isn't just a hypothetical, like whatever. We know, first of all, one, we've seen this just as a basic example with GPS. There's tons of data showing how having a GPS with you at all times that basically shows you how to get to your neighbor's house that's 3 houses down the road, and you just become so accustomed to that, your brain literally starts to forget how to get 3 houses down the road because you've just not used it. And I think the erosion of basic skills is a real risk with AI. I think we are going to see people, if we don't, and this is, I guess, an encouragement, but also a push to everybody. You've got to be working hard and fighting against the tendency to go, boy, it's convenient to have AI do this. It's really easy, and there's good reasons why. I understand it. We're tired. The world is crazy. There's a lot going on. I mean, as a dad of 8 kids with a very busy job and just a very busy life, there are definitely days where the temptation to go, I just don't want to think about this. It would be so much easier if AI just thought for me and I just didn't even hit the send button. And you know what? Maybe instead of even just hitting the send button, maybe I could just automate it and I'll just make it respond to everything on my behalf and not worry about it. That temptation is there. And I know, I'm sure I'm going to get the people that are going to be like, not for me, not me. I'm going to hold tightly to everything. To me, that's not the solution, to be clear. The solution is not to go old school and analog with everything. That's how we see that, that's like the stories you hear from your grandparents. Back in my day, I used to walk to school both feet, no shoes, no sandals, nothing. And I would walk through 8 feet of snow. You're like, first of all, 1, no, you didn't. And second of all, 2, that wasn't better. Okay. Like when I hear people that go, back when I was a kid, we didn't even have seat belts. Oh yeah, I know. And I know what the child mortality rate was in vehicular crashes. Like, don't tell me those were better days. So I by no means read things like this about cognitive decay and go, we got to get rid of AI. Stop letting AI be involved in our life. We need to get back to the good old days of doing everything the old fashioned way. No, but if we're not careful and we give in to this complacency and just straight up exhaustion, our basic skills are going to erode. They're going to diminish, and we're not going to be able to remember how to do very basic things. And this guy experiencing this, he's not alone. The number of people I talk to on a regular basis who are starting to have some of these moments here and there, and they go, I tried to do this thing I used to do all the time. I don't even know how. It's akin to if you ask somebody, tell me a phone number of somebody you talk to on a regular basis. Most people can't do it. Now you have to evaluate, are some of these things important or not? Well, yeah, you got to decide that. But if we just start collectively letting this stuff go, we're going to be in some real problems. And the reason is it creates a dependency. So not only do the skills decline, it also then creates a dependency because some of this stuff has to get done. I was having this conversation with my son last night because we were watching this Yes Theory episode of this thing in Honduras called Prospera. That's what it is. And on it, they're doing all these like wild experiments, and it's controversial. So if you want to look it up, you can look it up. But one of the things they were talking about was, implanting chips to be able to do different stuff in people. And, you're starting to see this with prosthetics and stuff like that. And my son and I were talking about the fact that one of the biggest dangers with some of this stuff is that, let's say you get, I don't know, some sort of and this is all hypothetical, so don't freak out, but let's say you get some sort of implanted AI enhancement to your cognitive ability. Okay, fine. Let's say you do that. But let's say that enhancement comes with a subscription cost because, hey, it's not free and we're enhancing your thinking for you. And so now it comes at a subscription. But now this is integrated into your very way of living. What happens when you can't pay that subscription? What happens when things get tight or you start to kind of want to deviate from it and you can't, and you've become totally dependent on it? And this to me is the bigger risk of the erosion of basic skills, is this idea that the more we erode basic skills and even forget the how to do it, there's lots of things I don't do anymore that I intentionally go back and make sure I know how to do them in the event I need to. And I actually build regular routines into my schedule where I do go analog on certain things just to force myself back into the routine to make sure that the muscles still work. And now, in terms of practices for people, that's going to look different for everybody. But my whole goal in doing that is I don't want to get to a place where suddenly something that I need to do on a regular basis has become so dependent on something that when it fractures or when I'm in a position where I can't tap into that anymore, I'm at a complete standstill. And so I think that to me is one of the real concerns that I have with this erosion of basic skills, like basic human communication, the ability to interact with another human being, the ability to take your thoughts and put them into words. That's not something you want to forget how to do or not be able to do without an AI model helping you do it. And so I think we need to be really, really careful about this because the data shows it's real. It's not just like a hypothetical, boogeyman that people are putting out there for political reasons. There's real science behind the fact that over-dependency leads to an erosion of basic skills, which then makes you more dependent on the tech, which we'd like to think all these things just work, but they don't, and you don't really own any of this. So as much as we'd like to think, well, my ChatGPT subscription is mine, well, it is till you don't pay the bill anymore, or it is until they go under, or until they do something you don't like and you want to get out and you go, uh-oh, I can't migrate that anymore. So I think those are real risks that we need to think about. And where I go with it is, again, it's not to go, we're all going to go Amish and go off the grid. Some might, and that's fine. I wrote about it this week on Substack. But I think for most of us, it's about having that laser focused intentionality on, hey, if I'm leveraging AI to do something, why? What purpose is it serving? And what am I doing to mitigate the risk of dependence? And what am I doing to make sure the overall skill isn't lost? So just as a really practical example, I like to use AI to help me gather my thoughts. That's fine. But then I'm also making sure I'm thinking about what it thought about in collaboration with me. So I'm still keeping my skills sharp. I'm not just taking what it thinks and then going, that's what I think. And I think those are the kinds of things. Same with communication. Can it help you with your writing? Maybe, but you better be editing and thinking about it and drafting something first that it reacts to make sure you're able to shape things, and then thinking about what did it change and why, and then there's a lot of work that goes into it. And whenever we try and shortcut the work, it doesn't end well. And I think that just goes back to why it's so important to balance our AI use and to be really balanced and intentional about it. It's not, do I do it or not? Those are decisions you might have to make first, but then it's a matter of how. And I think that's where it gets really messy. And so many people get hung up on the first question of, we sit and bicker and argue over whether we will or we won't, or whether it's good or whether it's bad, instead of going, well, why don't we just get into the meat of it? Why don't we just work through this together and see where it goes and what it looks like, and not get into the habit of the you shoulds, you shouldn't type of a thing, and say, well, here are some guiding principles. Here's some things to be aware of, which is what my goal with this was. Be aware that if you don't use your basic skills, they will erode. So be careful what basic skills you're giving to it, and also figure out ways to make sure you're keeping those skills sharp. Also, from a dependency standpoint, if you're integrating AI into things, well, just make sure you have backup plans and backup plans to the backup plans, so that if AI fails, you're not completely out of water. You don't go completely down with the ship. that kind of stuff. Like I just think about like when our power goes out. Is it frustrating that there's certain things we can't do? Yeah. But I've got board games that the kids love and we regularly bring them out before the internet goes out. So if the internet goes out, we just shift gears. It's like, okay, we're going to go do this, or we're going to go play this, or we're going to like, it's fine. It becomes natural. Okay. Let's move on to point number 3. So if you haven't seen the memes and all this other stuff all over the internet, if you hadn't heard, Blue Origin, which I believe is Bezos, Amazon's space program. It's kind of like a luxury space program. You know, you can go up into space and ooh and ah at the cosmos and then come back to Earth. And it's all over. People are, you know, blowing it up left and right. You know, it was an all-female cast, but of course it's all female celebrities. So then there's all this, you know, argument around what it all means. And I'll talk about some of the things related to it. There's all sorts of funny memes about, you know, pictures of people's reactions and some of the things that, you know, Katy Perry did or whatever. And Gail, I think Gail King, you know, I think that's who it is. There's a picture of her kind of like with this like grimace face as she's about to go on. And I mean, so there's some entertaining things related to it, but I don't, like usual, I don't want to get wrapped up in the hype of it, but I do want to speak into this kind of moment that happened and some of the things that I think we need to think about that I wrestle through when I see things like this. Like, okay, great. Blue Origin is sending celebrities to space and they happen to be female celebrities. And it's being positioned by some as this, you know, this is progress. This is gender equality. A bunch of rich, famous females are being shot into space. And how do we process that? And how do we differentiate between what's substantial, what is meaningful, and what is just noise and what is just like hype and PR? And I think one of the things that's been disappointing to me is that, like so many things, the arguments end up being was it this or was it that? You know, was this just a PR stunt? Some people are going to say, yes, it was. And then you're going to get other people that say, absolutely, no, it wasn't. You know, this was massive progress. And they end up waging war against each other instead of saying, hey, like, can't it be both? Can't there be some degrees of recognition that there is both in some of this stuff while holding intention that neither of them are inherently good? And what I mean by that is I saw the thing and I went, you know, I think it's pretty cool that a cast of all females, and it was a diverse group of females, went up into space. And that's something that 60 years ago, you know, 80 years ago, I mean, I don't know how many years ago, like never would have happened. Never would have happened. That would have just been laughable. People would have said, absolutely not. And so there's a part of me that goes, okay, like, I mean, there's something symbolic about that. I mean, I think it's something to go, hey, we can nod our head and tip our hat to that and go, that's a step, I guess. Well, at the same time, not going, see, this proves that it's equal for men and women. Well, no, like, let's not jump that far with it. Like, let's not pretend that a bunch of rich female celebrities going into space somehow proves we've conquered like bias and discrimination. Like, okay, like, let's not do that. And it's not like we sent a bunch of your average people into space. I mean, they were select, but I think that's where we got to be careful, because could you tear it apart? Well, of course you could. Could you also defend it? Well, of course you could. And that's the problem. Instead of going, well, all right, let's actually think about this objectively. And instead of just getting mad at each other and arguing on the internet, let's appreciate what it is for what it is, but let's not also oversell it and use it as a defense. And I think that goes back to some of the hard work we have to do in going, what is my bias? What is, you know, what do I want to see in this? And how do I make sure I'm not seeing a little too much of what I want to see in this? Now, one of the things that did sit a little bit uncomfortable with me, but I also, you know, struggle with in general is this whole idea of, I don't care where you sit on the political landscape. if you look at some of the real issues going on with our environment, I don't know that shooting celebrities up into space and burning up tons of stuff. And I know I'm going to get the people that go, the rocket fuel engines have vastly improved. Yes, I know. But there is a part of me that goes, with everything going on, is this really the best thing for the environment right now? Like, I get it's exciting. I get it's innovation. I get it's cool. But what if we were investing those resources in, I don't know, something, say, that's a little bit more productive than shooting celebrities into space so they can sing, what is it? What a Wonderful World. Now, I hold that intention for two reasons. One, the older I get, the more I hold an allergy to you should, they should, whatever, because I'm not the one making the decisions. I'm not involved in all the ins and outs of this. I don't know the details around it. Like, I couldn't even tell you like how much carbon emissions did that rocket put out. I'm not sure. I don't know. Where did the fuel, was it sustainably resourced, mined? Like, I don't know. I don't know those details. And so I'm not going to sit here and go, it was a terrible thing for them to do this, and here's why. And so I hold that intention. I also hold intention the fact that innovation a lot of times is messy. And there's a lot of stuff that you have to do to innovate that in the early days looks stupid from the outside. And I just know that from my own professional experience where, leading large teams and, leading major initiatives in global organizations, there's times I've maybe got a plan that's 3 years in the making, but I got to make some very high profile initial PR stunts to pull off what I need to do. And I can't tell everybody what's going on in the 3-year plan, because if I did, they'd go, that doesn't make any sense. And I don't think that's even, they'd shoot the idea down before they even saw it through. But in some ways, it can make the initial front look like, well, that was a waste. And it's like, it looks like a waste in isolation, but there's a reason that I'm doing this. Now, I'll be honest, this one I really struggle with. And I know I made a thing about space travel before, and I got lit up by people left and right about like how this is the future and we're going to colonize Mars and we're going to do all this. And maybe we will. And that's why I hold it in tension. And you won't ever hear me say the space program is stupid. We shouldn't do it. It's a waste. There's no value whatsoever to what we're doing. That would be a very arrogant statement for me to make. And I don't know enough about it. But I will admit, I struggle with seeing where some of this stuff is going and going, what are we really trying to accomplish with this? Especially when moves like this happen. So this goes back to kind of the resource allocation of this. It's like, okay, so we did this, but we did it. Where's this going? Like space tourism for the wealthy? Because if that's the goal, if that's the end game, then I struggle with this. Then I really struggle with this and I go, why is that adding value? And I know people could argue, well, but eventually it'll become so affordable anybody can do it. People said the same thing about airplanes. You used to only be able to fly if you were rich, and then now everybody can. And so with that, I go, well, okay, that's fair. And I understand. I could argue whether air travel is really all that beneficial and whether we really need it with the internet age, and maybe it, served its purpose in its time and should go back to being, I could make an argument for that. And so but space travel to me is one where I go, I can at least wrap my head around air travel. I know people who live in different parts of the world and they want to see their families, and, it connects people in a way that is meaningful. So, okay, flying up to the stratosphere to be inspired only to come down and kiss the dirt. So we make that available to wealthy people first with the goal of eventually making it available to everybody. I mean, again, there are moments even I could argue for it. And that's why I hold this intention, but I just look at some of the cons that come with it. And like I said, the environmental piece and the resources that go into, I mean, do you know how expensive it is to build some of these things, and then to build it also that we can say, what, we pop rich people into space so they can have a moment? Is that really the best that we could be doing? But I'm not in charge of Blue Origin. I'm not, behind the scenes on some of these. I wish I had more answers to this. And if somebody listening or watching this has a different opinion, please share it. But I watched this whole thing and kind of went, okay, I mean, there's some things, I think it's cool. Maybe people will finally, this one's going to blow up the comments. Maybe people will finally stop believing the earth is flat. But what does this accomplish? I don't know. And I'm struggling to see where that's going. Now, maybe it will, but it might be many lifetimes beyond me. All right. So this goes on to another kind of one of these esoteric, what do you think about this? Now, if you have, let me know. But there's been this sweeping bunch of stuff that we've brought back extinct animals, and it has to do with a company called Colossal Biosciences, I think, who are all over the media. It's all over the hype cycle. They de-extincted the dire wolf. They brought it back to life, and now, we can bring back any species that once existed, and, all this other stuff. I honestly, when I first saw it, I was like, oh boy, did anybody ever watch the beginning of Jurassic Park? There are just so many things that are things of sci-fi that I feel like it's on a weekly basis anymore. You're just like, yeah, we're doing that now. I know that used to be a thing of like Hollywood, mini series and multi-billion-dollar movie series, and now it's like, yeah, well, I did it in my backyard the other day. But there's a lot of debate around this for a couple good reasons. I think it opens the door, and it's open to something that I think we all can be thinking about, because while this might be a distant, like, okay, what's this have to do with me? It does have something to do with you. And it's good to be aware it's happening so that you can be wrestling through some of these things. Going back to my very first point, that it's good to stretch these muscles. It's good to work these muscles. It helps you not just become so atrophied you just don't even have the cognitive capacity to deal with this kind of stuff. Now, here's where some of the controversy comes into play. Is there's this huge debate over whether they actually have de-extinctified. I don't know if that's a word. Maybe I'll get merch and that'll be a shirt that's on it. De-extinctified. But there's this debate on, did you really bring back an extinct animal, or did you just kind of play with genetics enough that it looks and has a lot of the same traits as this extinct species? It's very similar to the conversation that I have around AI, where it's like, can AI replace people? Well, it's not really a matter of whether it's as powerful as a person or whether it can replace a person. It's whether it looks, feels, and convinces people it can. And I feel like that's the same thing here. It's like, well, did we really de-extinct an extinct animal? Or did we just figure out how to do genetic modification enough that we went, okay, that's what we think it looked like, so we've now modified genetics to create a similar version of that. Ta-da! And really, when you think about it, I dug into some of this and I was like, this is some of the dumbest arguing I've ever seen, because who did somebody also invent a time machine so we can prove whether it's true or not? I mean, who's going back in time and grabbing one of these dire wolves and then bringing it back and going, well, you see here, actually, this is not the same, because turns out in ancient times, the fur was purple. We had no idea. We were just drawing things based on whatever. I guess we were wrong. We can't prove that. And so this argument over it is a little bit nonsensical. And I do think I get the whole we've de-extincted an extinct animal trends well on social media, and that's probably why they did it. They're trying to draw a bunch of attention to things. But I do tend to be more in the camp of, based on the process they took, I don't know that I would say that they really de-extincted it. I do think this was more a step in genetic modification based on assumptions they think they have about an extinct species. Again, we can't confirm it. Looking at how they did some of this stuff, it wasn't, and I won't get into all the biosciences of it, but it's not like they captured a, unique specimen of DNA and out of an ancient fossil, and somehow magically figured out how to do a perfect clone of exactly whatever that thing was. Which, if you're around in the 90s, remember when they cloned a sheep? There was all sorts of stuff that was like, oh, this didn't quite go according to plan. And I think that, to me, is what brings up some of this other stuff related to some of the ethical considerations around some of these projects, where, similar to the space thing, I go, what's the goal here? What is the end game? And just because we maybe even could, let's say in theory, we could de-extinct something, should we? Now, again, I don't hide my worldview. So for me, I tend to lean towards the camp of everything happens for a reason. So if something is extinct, there's probably a reason it's extinct. But then the same argument has been thrown back in my face, where it's like, yeah, well, then if we discovered how to de-extinct it, wouldn't that be then part of the plan too? And it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess, but this just goes back to some of these, like, what's the end game behind it? And what value do we get if, let's say, we de-extinct extinct species? That's where my head goes to. Okay, this dire wolf. Is there a need for dire wolves? Is there something about that species that existed in a certain time that, because it's extinct, the conditions have changed such that we need them again? And so this is an attempt to try and course correct damage we've done. Not from what I could tell. To me, this was more like a mad scientist project, like Dr. Frankenstein, in his laboratory going, she's alive. You're like, okay, like, did you not watch that movie either? Like, I don't know that this is really what is the best use of things. And are we taking into consideration some of the potential butterfly effects of some of this stuff? Let's say, in theory, well, I mentioned it at the beginning of this. If you haven't seen Jurassic Park, just go watch Jurassic Park. There's things we don't think of where we go, this will be really cool. We'll be able to create this and it'll be amazing. And we'll be able to control it and we'll be able to do all this and it'll be wonderful. And we'll all have dire wolf puppies and it'll be the new trend. And then we can pop them in Gen AI and say, turn it into a human. And then we'll have laughs and laughs about pictures of our dire wolf puppies that, we've now made human images of. Like, okay, yeah. And then they go off the chain and something goes horribly, horribly wrong. And we go, why were we doing this in the first place? And now, again, I don't want to get into that they shouldn't be doing it, because I don't have enough details to know what is the goal of this. Is this one of those like, hey, we've got a long-term plan for why we're doing genetic modification and what we're trying to accomplish here? Then I might be able to weigh in more on is this, a necessary step in innovation? Is this one of did they take the safest path to test this stuff out? Are they, considering the moral and ethical, ecological implications of this? Like, what happens if we do resurrect a bunch of dire wolves and release them into the wild? What if we say, well, we don't release them into the wild, we just keep them into a lab environment? Well, is that really the best thing? There's a lot of just unanswered questions with this, but it was really interesting watching everybody just flip out about this and argue of whether it's really extinct or not extinct. Does this mean we're going to bring back the dinosaurs? All this other kind of stuff. And I don't know where it's going, but I do think we need to be thinking about, one, what is real and what is just pretending to be something and presenting as real. And this, to me, is an example of, is this really bringing something back from extinction, or is this just modifying something of today that now resembles traits of something of the past? Does it matter? I think it does. And I think it's worth at least making sure we're representing it accurately. And I personally represent it more in the camp of, we've done some genetic modification to get a little bit of a window in the past by creating a species that looks very similar to what we think something was a long time ago. Okay, well, then that goes to the next question of why, to what end? Were those questions thought through? Were they considered? Are they still being considered? As they consider, do we continue down this path? Are they continuing to revisit? Should we be doing this? How do we have a decision criteria? How do we have an ethical, moral framework for how we make these decisions? If that's in place and you're following that process, I may not agree with what you're doing, but I can at least respect the fact that you're representing it properly. You're putting it through a rigorous, objective set of criteria. And you know what? Are we still going to make mistakes with this kind of stuff? Sure. It's part of life in a broken world. We're going to do things thinking we've thought of everything, only to have it blow up in our face and realize it didn't. Now, I don't think we're going to see dire wolf puppies on, TikTok anytime soon. So I don't think that's really what we're getting at. But I do think we need to consider the fact that this kind of stuff, which seems like stuff of science fiction, is one, not only not science fiction anymore, but it's going to become even more prevalent when I think about my first point about, now we got PhD level AI models. You think those aren't going to be used in experiments like this to say, hey, how do we better modify the genetics of a species to resurrect an extinct animal? Like, that's exactly the kind of stuff these advanced models are going to do. And they're going to do a really good job of it, which is why we have to focus on how do we represent it? What are the ethical considerations? And what are the things that we may not be considering? What might happen? I can't count how many times my kids and I have watched some documentary or some video about some invasive plant or animal species that somebody brought into this environment, and now it's wreaking absolute havoc, on the Great Lakes or on this rainforest, or, it's destroyed this crop because somebody thought, hey, this is cute. I'll just bring this in my, carry-on bag and bring it back home. And it disrupts an entire ecological ecosystem. And we have a really bad habit of going, yeah, we'll just deal with that later. We don't want to think about that now. Isn't it cool we can make direwolf puppies? Slow down, folks. And I think that's kind of my concluding message here is, as we continue kind of stepping into this space where things are moving so fast, so aggressively, there's so much we can do today that we never could have even dreamed of, even a few years ago. That temptation to just let progress be the defining factor, and any progress is meaningful progress. We got to push back against that. We got to say, hang on. I know it might seem like I'm slowing you down, but I promise I'm not. I just want to make sure we don't kill ourselves in the process, or we don't end up creating a monster we can't undo, type of a thing. So with that, I hope you found this helpful. Hope you found it interesting. Let me know what you think in the end, and I will see you on the other side.